This is Shelley Klingerman, and you're watching the Break It Down show.
We are doing it right now. We are breaking it down. I have new. We are doing it right now. I have new equipment that I'm trying to get sorted out, and I thought I had it sorted, and then it got glitchy, and now I'm having to backpedal back to the old webcam. Luckily, webcams are pretty good on these modern laptops.
Yeah, no, I am not the person you want to reach out to for technical help. Trust me.
So, just in terms of introduction to the audience and everything, Shelley's been on the show a couple of times. You've brought some incredible guests with you when you've come. But you've also come in your own right as an author and as someone who's focused on in the security industry on helping women to feel and be more secure. And as a dude, I am aware that my presence can be scary for a woman who doesn't know me. I mean nobody, no harm, but you don't know that, right? Like there's no sign that says harmless guy, kind of thing. And then I realized from talking to my female friends and loved ones and everything, just how unsafe women are at all times. It is shocking to me how imperiled and how that mindset has to be constantly present. And it's until you get some confidence, it's usually fear based, or avoidance based.
Yeah, and our gut often goes off, and we are really, really bad about dismissing our gut because of not wanting to be a sissy or not wanting to back down or whatever. So we as women have to be validated and backed up on, you know what, if your gut is going off, if something doesn't feel right, you have to trust it. And we're really, really bad about dismissing it. So we have to unlearn some of the things that we've been taught too, as far as sometimes it's okay for us not to be nice because we've been taught to be nice and to be pleasant. And in some situations, that's just not our best option. So, yeah, there's a lot of things that we, process in a day, and sometimes men just don't have to think about it, and therefore they just don't have any perspective on it. But we always appreciate those who, kind of recognize it and become our allies.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all for it, right? Like, how do we? I don't want anybody to feel afraid or be imperiled, and just in general, the access to this kind of information. But it does take someone like you because, well, one, you're passionate about it. Two, it helps that you're a lady and everything. But also, you get it. I mean, like, you're not someone. You've got legitimate credentials in this field and a very unique niche.
Yeah, and I think really where my credentials come from as being a female traveling by myself most of my career, and missing out on a lot of things that my male colleagues took advantage of. When our meetings were done, and he would go out and have a great meal and a great cigar, and I would go back to my room because I was just not comfortable going out by myself in some bigger or unfamiliar city. So a lot of my work has come from my experience, which is why was passionate about wanting to share it. And to be very honest, now I have a daughter who is getting ready to travel abroad to study abroad. And she's really close to the age I was where I started my career. And I want her to be better prepared than I was.
There's a broad thing. I want to get back to that because there's an actual industry for kidnapping and
Yeah.
heisting and all kinds of things, trafficking, and you have to be aware of that, but you can't be crippled by that. The other
Right.
thing that always struck me as interesting from a lot of time deployed and everything is, look, the military has females, but in a lot of places it's 10% or less females to men. And so there's a lot of work that goes into maintaining your professional demeanor. And there's a lot of people that if you and I were to deploy together, like let's say we're not even on the same team, like you're there and I'm there, we're both doing different jobs, and it turns out we need to work together on a lot of things because of what we do. If we have more than a couple of meals together, we are now having sex.
Yeah.
Whether it's true or not. And you and I might live on opposite sides of the camp and clearly go in the opposite direction every it doesn't matter. But it is because of there's something in the female presence that makes people hunger for intrigue, you know, pursue the female, because they want some kind of intimacy. And it's just there's so much extra stuff in there where you're in a war zone and you might be in serious danger on your own camp, either professionally or physically or both.
Yeah, and these are again, these are things that it's a mindset. Really what it comes down for women is a mindset that we are going to do whatever we need to do. We are going to unlearn some of these childhood things that we have been taught. So there in that instance that might be necessary that we are rude and we're very direct and we hold our boundary where it's not natural because again we are hardwired to for the most part be kind and when we are rude and we are kind of forceful that steps us outside of our comfort zone and you have to really consciously think about it and validate and reinforce that in certain situations that is appropriate and it's being exposed to this kind of reinforcement training, which is what I do through Stiletto, is giving these women confidence. Like, yeah, this doesn't feel right, and I feel like my boundary's getting crossed. Um, Having the confidence, the mindset to push back on that instead of letting us stay in an uncomfortable situation, which I
Right.
had that happen to me often because I just really did not know how to get myself out of it, and I did not have an established boundary and some of that I'll take personal responsibility for. But yeah, there's a lot that we kind of have to process, and we need to really start modeling. You talked about the traveling abroad. I cannot go with my child, but I can educate her, train her, model for her, reinforce and validate what she needs to take with her. And then once she's gone, I just have to trust that I have prepared her as best I can and that she is appropriately aware and concerned and anxious is maybe not the right word, but I certainly don't want her going over there thinking that nothing could happen. I also want her to go over there and enjoy her experience and not be hyper vigilant to where she can't be in the moment. So I feel good about the work we've done so far, and I will definitely be keeping tabs on what are the situations that she's been in that maybe she doesn't feel she was prepared for, and I'll bring that back and incorporate that too because this just has got to be um, evolving because traffickers and these new tactics evolve, so you have to stay kind of ahead of it. But she's appropriately concerned, which she should be, but she's not freaked out about it. So I think that's the right place to stay.
You have to, yeah, you have to find that space. You have to learn the boundaries, and it's okay to evolve your boundaries over
Yep.
time. You want to always, because it's easy to loosen your boundaries up too quickly,
Yep.
but you also don't want them so tight, like you said, that you're hyper vigilant. The other thing about all of that is in terms of like females in the military, right? There's a lot of activism and ideology that goes into that. And that ignores the fact that your presence on the battlefield walking around makes you a target of greater desire. And there's just no way around that.
Mhm.
And because our culture wants to push this, equality based, and I'm not against this, I'm just saying because our culture supports this and we want women to be professionals, we want them to participate in the military force on equal footing with men. That does not mean that in the country that you're in, you are not
Right.
target a very, very exposed target. And so if you're in a formation where you're, spread out to dissipate, like, being together in a group, um, and you're on the edge of it and someone grabs you,
Mhm.
I mean, that it can be like grab the first female you see, and all of a sudden you've become this target. So there's an ideology and practicality thing too, where we have to accept that, someone sees a woman, they're going to treat them differently than they're going to treat a man.
Yeah, and I think doing your homework before you even go. What we've been doing is, finding out what's going on in the area that she's traveling to, literally knowing where the embassies are. Is there anyone in your network that's in the country that you're going that you have those connections? So
Right.
doing a little pre-work too gives you that confidence before you go. So there's lots of things that we can and should, and many do, um, to as women to compensate for some of this, vulnerability that we just naturally face.
Right, right. And I love that you do it, and I don't wanna spend the whole show on that, but I definitely wanted to talk about it because as we try to come out of this pandemic/endemic and we try to figure out how to get back to work, some of what you do is go on site and provide this training so we can learn where to set boundaries.
Absolutely.
We can learn ways to actually be able to operate in an area whether it's domestic or abroad or whatever it is, so that you are able to stand your ground, but also not be terrified of where you're at. And that's one of the great things about what you do, plus your book also.
Yeah, and I think honestly too, while we've been kind of battened down and some of this diversity, equity, inclusion has come on scene, I think there is companies that are taking note that there are, in the construction industry, in the energy, there's some sectors that are predominantly male. And I'm doing some work with those companies now that just a little bit of light has been shed that it can be difficult when you're a female in these kind of male dominated industries. And it's the companies are investing in the training because as a female, the more confident you are walking the street, the more confident you are in the boardroom and vice versa. And again, I speak that from personal experience. So I do give credit to companies that are bringing this kind of training in and really investing in their employees in situational awareness and this confidence and this mindset because it is applicable when you're at work, but also very much when you are not. And they're investing in the person. And I think that's really nice to see.
I put the title of your book cover, Get Vigilant, The Savvy Woman's Guide to Personal Safety, Self-Protection Measures, and Countermeasures. There's
Thank
the
you.
Amazon link. You get that book there. You took a long pause and a deep breath before you said this last segment. What, I mean, as we try to figure out diversity, equity, inclusion, and by the way, unity, because diversity and equity, they go this direction, right? How do we stay together while we're trying to be more inclusive? It does cause some pauses. What are your thoughts on why is it so hard to explain these things? And why does it I have to be very careful what I want to say because I'm not trying to offend anybody. I'm not trying to say something that's outmoded. And, I like inclusivity, but I also understand that unity is a thing as well.
Yeah, I think I don't necessarily have answers either. I would say that some of this movement for women has, in some instances, made again women feel like you can't back down. That we have to be strong. You have to stay, in this forefront. But the downside of that can be that when again our gut is going off and we know that something is maybe off or is uncomfortable or not right, um, you still have to have that permission to disengage or again to be rude, be bold. So you have to balance that as a female. Like, yeah, I absolutely want equality and I want women to have the same opportunities. But some of that messaging can also reinforce for somebody who hears it wrong that it's not okay for me to back down when maybe that is exactly or disengage when that's exactly what you should be doing.
Mm.
So the unity part, I think I will say just from my own experience that I have taught and spoke in mixed groups, men and women. I often target women just because that's, where my experience is and my, kind of expertise from what you said, because that's what I am. But I think what's really interesting is after these conversations, men will get a perspective on some things that they never had to think about. So, when the discussion is, women sharing stories about walking down the street, and to your point, sometimes just the presence of a man, if it's just you and a man, can be intimidating and it, makes us a little uncomfortable. Men do not intend to do that most of the time. It's just and you don't even understand what that's like because it's not uncomfortable for you to be, just you and a female walking down the street. It's probably something you don't even think about. It's not
Right.
even on your radar. But when you give them the perspective as to why we get a little nervous or why we start, looking over our shoulders, they're like, I never even thought about it. And then they will start sharing things that, some will say, oh, yeah, I will talk on my phone loud as I'm approaching a female walking by herself, just so she knows I am not trying to sneak up on her. Or some men say, oh, yeah, I'll call out ahead and be like, hey, I just didn't want to startle you. I'm coming up behind you. Some men say they cross the street so they don't even have to have that encounter and make that lady feel uncomfortable. So it starts a conversation, which I think is really healthy. And it gives them a perspective. When you again share, a lot of times women will go back to their hotel room after a meal and they're in a really awesome city, but they don't feel comfortable going out. And the male counterpart will be like, "Oh yeah, I had the best meal and cigar last night. What'd you do?" And we're like, "Oh, I ordered room service." Well, why would you do that? You're in, so and so. And they're like, "Well, I didn't feel comfortable going out." And they just never even thought about, why that might be. So I think it's really healthy. And I think those are really good ways to bring unity. And safety is an issue that everybody really needs to think about. And especially in today's kind of society when we are seeing all kinds of crazy violent acts that are random and not necessarily targeted, that anybody really needs to be thinking about this stuff right now. This stuff being situational awareness and kind of paying attention to what's going on.
There's also we fetishize the random act of violence. If you watch the LA news, you're going to see a car crash every night. You're going to see a random murder every night, and all of these things. It doesn't represent the reality of the situation. I mean, there's 3.5 million people that live in Orange County, and that means every day someone's going to get murdered.
Mhm.
A lot of people here, but it also means that 3.5 million people are not going to get murdered.
Right.
They're not going to have an accident. They're just going to, you can we have mountains here. If you drive down a mountain pass enough and you cover it enough, someone's going to get crushed by a boulder. It's just going to happen. And the randomness of life doesn't mean that that is a pervasive thing. I'm wondering. So one of the things I struggle with the gut is I have a gut. I trust it, right? Women have a gut. They trust it. But you have to develop that gut. It's not just a hunch, an intuition. There has to be some experience, some training that goes into that because you don't test your gut. You just you go with it and you remember when it works out. You don't remember when your gut told you, "Hey, your tires are low," on air. And you don't check them
Mhm.
or whatever it is, right? It's hard to it's easy to say trust your gut, but how do you develop a reliable gut so that like, hey, this is something is tripping my spidey sense. I need to make sure I up my security level for a minute or two.
Well, I mean, I do think you have your natural gut where something is not right. I also think then, being exposed to this training like I do and like others do, but just again, when you sense something, having that ability to reference back to something like, oh, if I'm sitting here with my hands crossed, you got to look at like what's the environment. But if I'm here, sure, I might be cold or whatever. But if I'm sitting like this and I have a mask on, I have a hat on, I have a hood on. Like when you start putting the whole picture together, I think that's when that training comes in. Like, okay, like, and it's 80 degrees out, and I've got an overcoat on, and I have my hands in my pocket, and I'm not looking up, or I'm standing in an awkward position. I think you have to be able to evaluate that. And I think the training gives you that to go back and be like, yep, that's not right. Without anything, like in a moment of crisis, you revert to what you were trained to do. And I think so often nobody's investing in that training. So you have nothing to go and kind of bounce that feeling off of. So that's where the training I do, it's mostly about a mindset and being in the right mindset that if something does go down, you have already made the decision you're going to do whatever it takes. Not having that predetermined mindset, it can really get you in a catch loop where you're like, oh, am I reading this wrong? I don't feel right. Am I reading it wrong? I don't want to overreact. So coming back to answer the question, I think training is how you train that gut in one way. I think you always will have that natural, like just your spidey senses are like something is off. Having that training gives you that confidence to be like, I'm not even going to even attempt to investigate it. I'm going to choose safety because that's always my mantra. If I'm not sure, I'm going to choose safety. There's nothing that's going to come out of taking the more reserved approach, rather than being like, oh, I don't want to be a sissy or I don't want to be, you know, a ninny, like a really old term. But so I think that's really how you balance that natural gut and then that trained gut. Does that
We've
answer your question?
Yeah, I think so,
That's
and
kind of a long.
it's not an easy thing to answer, and just that
No.
reset, like, I think we've talked a number of times, and I always use the example of this parking lot in my hometown where I'll walk, and I'll do a 360 as I walk,
Yeah.
'cause I want everybody to see me being aware of what's going on, and, sure as shit, we after my brother's funeral service, we went to Chevy's for lunch afterwards, and that's in that parking lot, and not 1, not 2, but 3 cars got broken into while we were sitting at lunch,
Was
and
yours one?
no, no, not mine, and that's just dumb luck because I was literally parked next to a car that got broken into.
Mm.
So but, my ex-wife's car got broken into, my cousin's car, and somebody else's car, and my daughter's laptop was stolen. All these things happened. So
Oh,
this is a parking lot where you have to know that there is a risk that either your person or your stuff will be in some way attacked potentially, you know? And, that that gut thing can be before my gut even goes off, I know this is an area that's challenging to park. It's a Costco there, right? I mean, people park and they go in for it's easy to spend 90 minutes in a Costco and not
mhm.
get all your shopping done. So, it's a parking lot where people are gone for a long time, and this happens all the time. So you have to go, "Okay, this is a parking lot where things happen. How do I maintain my own safety?" There's only so much you can do for your car, right?
Right.
Not much you can do for that. But for your own person, how do you maintain safety and then even preempt the gut and like, "I'm going to walk in this group of people that are all clearly going shopping," or whatever it's going to be. I'm going to look around so everybody sees that I'm aware because, if you're by yourself, you are a target in
Yeah.
that parking lot for sure.
Yeah, 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 and I think again that's where I would say the training comes into play because you can add layers onto this perception that you're giving out. So, walking with your head up, looking around, staying off your phone, walking with a straight spine, walking with purpose. All of those things are things that predators and criminals don't like to mess with. So you kind of bump off their radar because they're usually inherently lazy and they're just looking for a victim and not anybody that's going to fight back. So if you just perceive that you're going to fight back, but just knowing to do those things and then practicing it and making it a habit and then modeling those things for your kids and telling them why you're doing that. So again, in the 10 years when they leave your nest and go study
Right.
abroad or go to college, you have armed them with the best foundation so that when they leave, you as a parent feel like I have prepared them as best I can. But most of us don't take that opportunity while our kids are at home, and so that's what I would really encourage and what I kind of reinforce during my training. All of these things you're doing for you to stay safe, model it for your kids, explain why you're doing it so that they create good habits
Right.
while they're still at home. And then when they leave, you as the parent are as comfortable as you can be with that. We are never going to be comfortable with it, but we're more, at least you've armed them to be,
Yeah.
um, situationally aware. And that's all we can do, right?
If you wanna find more on Shelley, make sure you go to stilettoagency.com or buy for the people in your life that could use it, Get Vigilance: The Savvy Woman's Guide to Personal Safety, Self-Protection Measures, and Countermeasures, because those
It's a
are
long title.
I know, those are Shelley's
Sorry. I know. That's note to self. Next book, don't make the
well,
subtitle
and
so
you've been
long.
on so many times, but we hardly ever get back to what you do, and I wanted to open up the show with that stuff because it is remarkable, and I literally know nobody else that does this in the way that you do it, and also your peers who work on the male side of the equation are all impeccable. So, I mean, you've got friends that know this stuff. Your stuff is as good as anybody's out there, so everybody should check it out.
Thank
Um,
you.
how are you doing? I know you lost your brother also. We both lost our brother last year within a couple 3 months of each other. How are you holding up?
Um, you know, I'm not gonna lie, it's been really tough. My brother was a 30-year detective and an FBI task force officer and was ambushed and murdered as he left his office in July. So it was not targeted to him. It was targeted for the most part at law enforcement, at federal, and he just was unfortunately, wrong place, terrible time. don't know if there's really anything he could have done different. There's lots of nuances to this story, um, but it's been tragic. It's been hard. I know I'm speaking to someone who can experience it, but as a response, my family and I have started a nonprofit called Project Never Broken. And it was started really to help us grieve. Again, anyone that's had this kind of tragedy and just so sudden and random and evil and senseless, you swing from great sadness to actually just pissed off mad. And without having a positive way to channel that anger, it can be destructive. And you have to be intentional about doing something productive with that energy. Otherwise, it will get away from you. So that's really what we have done. We've started a nonprofit to honor and and memorialize him, but also have something good come from this tragedy, from this senseless evil act. It won't stay or land there. Something will come of this, and that is what we are setting out to do, to make sure of.
I'm sorry that you've had to deal with this. I mean, it's a terrible thing, and your brother, he stood in the breach. He kept his oath and worked to keep us all safe for 30 years, and all I can do is thank you for, you know, having such a great brother, if that's a thing, but also empathize with you because it sucks to lose someone early and violently and every how it's just, you didn't come home expecting that to happen that day, and it did.
Yeah, no, it totally threw us on our heels, and much like my tragedy isn't any greater than anyone else's, but it's something that, if there's anything that we can do to prevent someone else from having to experience it, then that's what we're gonna do.
Yeah. 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 Uh, what is the goal of the charity? Like, what specifically are you guys trying to do? Are you still sorting that out?
I'll be honest, we are still sorting that out because we're researching to find out where can we have the biggest impact. There are lots of great organizations doing lots of great things. Some of it, they're doing it well. Some of them we will just get behind. Um, it's really important personally to support law enforcement officers and their families because, again, I've experienced this. I can only imagine that if you wear the uniform and you are seeing this kind of tragedy happen day in and day out, and then on top of, the deprosecution and the lightening of sentences and this false narrative and, some of the hate and the vilification, it would be a really hard uniform to wear, but we need them. We need them to keep the line. We need them to keep our community safe. We need it so that we can continue, to carry on our lives. So it's important. This work was important to me before. It's even more so now. And we're going to support the law enforcement community and their families. We're going to advocate for them. And we are really honoring the resiliency of people. Probably much like you, I saw in our situation the worst of humanity, the suspect, and I also experienced the best of humanity with people coming out to support my family and to honor and respect. And so I've seen the best of it. I know it's out there. I know the majority of this country supports law enforcement. So it is really getting something organized for people to get behind to again have positive impact and support those who are still willing to do that job. They're wired differently. They're brave souls. They're resilient souls, but they're human. And
No.
so we are still sorting out what is the best way to have impact, but it will be to boldly support law enforcement through hope, help, and healing and honor the resiliency of humanity in a nutshell. And where we go and where it evolves and who we partner with is still a bit yet to be seen, but it will be done.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for doing that work. I mean, I'm all for having the police do a better job, but so are the police. They're
Yeah.
they're all for that. They want
Yeah.
they a lot of we've had a bunch of people on. Sid Hale is one of them. He's like, we work for the executive branch of the local government. And if they, are directing us to go in a direction, our task is to go in that direction. And it doesn't mean that they get to go out and mug people and everything, but of the millions and millions of police interactions every year, the vast majority, beyond the number of where chaos can just set in, these are safe, normal interactions. But again, we
Yeah.
fetishize
Right.
these these things that are, I'm always fascinated whenever a tree falls somewhere and smashes someone's car, hopefully not them, but or a house. Here is this thing that you just, how are you going to prevent that? We hate
Yeah.
to cut down trees. The government won't let you always cut down trees, and then a tree falls. Well, I mean, what are you supposed to do about these things? These are less often than lightning strikes, but we report, I mean, if you reported every lightning strike, we would think that lightning was the scourge of humanity and on the rise everywhere. I'm not forgiving bad behavior. However, we have to also be able to put into scale what it means to be a police officer,
Yeah.
because I'll tell you right now, if you look around Oakland, California, I call it a feral city. There, they cannot hire enough police. The police get trained and they leave because they don't want to work there. It's
Right.
risky for your life. It's risky for your career. We've
Right.
made that job in a
Well,
lot
who
of
would wanna do that job in the environment that they have to perform it in? And again, I'm not here to argue that,
right,
every
right,
profession has their, 1% that taints the whole, but,
yeah,
right now, the question I would ask, would you encourage your child to go into law enforcement right now? And if your answer is no, then, but you expect these that are wearing the uniform or going in to
yeah,
keep you safe. So,
right,
um, that's why it's just important to us right now to
yeah,
support them.
fair
We
enough.
appreciate the job they do, and I honestly, the other point is I've seen the brotherhood, and they're tight, and when they lose one of their own, it is like losing a family member, and then to know that, the reality is that it could be them. So, how brave is it to continue to go put your life on the line for someone you don't even know?
Yeah, no, you're right. It says a lot. What else do you want to get into? What else should we chat about? I know we're kind of catching up today. We covered the nonprofit, we covered your security work, but what else do you want to talk about?
Well, I mean, I don't want to take the mic, but how are you?
Yes.
You asked me, and I know that you're dealing with the same loss that I am. Again, a loss is a loss, and a sibling is, your nuclear family. So it's hard. Tell me, how are you doing?
Yeah, well, it is tough, and you know that I work with Save the Brave. There are, we're like the podcast arm of the company, of the charity, and I work a lot of the year on that aspect. And what do we try to do? We try to prevent veteran suicide. You can't get them all, but we can certainly invest in those people, get them turned around, help them build out of wherever they're at. And then, ironically, my brother, a veteran, concludes his own life. We didn't figure the path out, and so then you have that stigma of suicide, and what happens with that, and trying to explain that all the time, like, hey, my brother was suffering. If you think he was doing a permanent solution to a temporary problem, you're wrong. He had multiple problems, and they exacerbated one another, and he was getting therapy, he was, doing all the things. He just ran out of time. And my brother was
Mhm.
tough. He was not someone who was afraid of confrontation to his own fault sometimes. And you put all this stuff together, and if the way I've characterized it is, luckily for me personally, I had a strong indication that my brother was in deep trouble before his passing. And I was able to work with my therapist on where I needed to be and how to keep my own mask on my own face, because I have my own struggles with suicidal ideation. Just for everybody, I'm fine. I have tools to deal with it. I talk candidly about it because I want my peers to know you can get to this spot. But we weren't able to get Eric there fast enough. And if it was even possible. So it's as if he got a terminal diagnosis, like, hey, you're probably not going to make it through this. And he for sure went from being a productive, healthy, powerful part of his community, and then just the line went down on his life really, really fast, to where his friends that knew him were like, what in the hell happened?
Mhm.
And it was mental health. And we weren't able to turn him around. So I was able to prepare. I didn't come home to a surprise and a shock like you were. I was for sure shocked, but it wasn't inevitable, but it also wasn't unlikely, that he wouldn't make it through. So I've been sort of dealing with it at some level for well over a year. And then once we lost him, yeah, I mean, it's horrible, right? And then we had all the conversations, this is what I want to have happen. This is how I want my life to be, all these things. And so I take on this new burden that's super heavy. And then I'm trying to marshal a bunch of grieving people down this path with a pandemic going on. So when we did all the
Mhm.
services stuff, like, yeah, this past weekend, it was a super heavy load. I had family in from all over the nation. I have so many friends. Eric, my brother had friends, and just it was a lot. And my buddy framed it at best. I spent about just a little less than 4 days in town, and he's like, I felt like we just spent a long weekend in Vegas, and I'm like, yeah. And I wasn't like drinking the whole time.
Mhm.
I mean, I had a couple of drinks along the way, right? But I was
Right.
never once drunk. And I'm like, "Yeah, I feel horrible right now. I just need to go to bed." And so that's what it's been like for me. There's still grieving for me to do, but I've been so busy, doing the just kind of I call it the chief of staff role, for my brother's life, and trying to make sure everything's taken care of, line up resources, get resources in the right spot, that I haven't really had a time to really just sit down and deal with it. And yet I've been dealing with it for
Right.
a while now.
Right. Yeah, I think the irony in that, work that you had already been doing and work that I had already been doing, and then it affects us personally. So it just honestly throws more fuel on that fire, at least for me. It just kind of emboldened me more to continue this work and the importance of it. And Greg was a collaborator of mine, so
Yeah. One of the other things too is, you try to sort life out and try to learn lessons. And I'm pretty good at this already, but obviously I need to do more of it. It's, to continue to take the opportunity to do this, to create like we're doing right now, have this conversation, let people identify with this. The next person that loses a sibling or a wife or whatever it is, and they're just crushed. Like, here we are, we're dealing with it, we're talking about it, and you can do it too. You never know when that's going to happen, but also and this is like the thing that I said as I said the last things about his life in terms of the celebration of life and the funeral and everything was, let's not do weddings and funerals to get together. Let's get together all
yeah.
the time. His funeral wasn't that expensive. You put 100 people together, it is relatively inexpensive to throw this event and just go out and get together, whether it's a family reunion or just, you throw a party in their honor, and 100 to 300 people it's just not that expensive to do, and the quality of the time you get to spend with other people, it's invaluable. I would have rather have, and this is always true, I would have rather have thrown a party for Greg or for Eric where they're there, and then we say all these great things about them and go, I can't tell you what a badass
Yeah.
Eric is. Let me tell you
Yeah.
about a time when Greg was incredible. And let's not, we don't have to throw a funeral for a person when they're alive, but let them know, hey, listen,
Mhm.
you did this one thing one time, and I wanted to let you know how much of an impact it had on my life.
Yeah, absolutely. I think to your point, we are learning so much more about things that he was doing and impact that he had on people. I think the one thing that if you knew him, you didn't realize it because he was kind of compartmentalized. He would, he had relationships, but he had what has been kind of labeled as this chameleon effect where um, he had the ability to talk to the person he was in front of, but he could also go from talking he did, drug task force, he was an author, he wrote about his time undercover, but he could go from having a conversation and making that person feel comfortable, maybe someone who is struggling with drugs to a drug addict to a dealer to, he was in the bureau and he often met with his administration. So he had the ability to kind of be the person he needed to be based on who he was interacting with. And it's truly a gift to be able to marry someone else's, to mirror them, if you will. He just was incredibly humble and kind and made everyone feel like they had been a friend. And we've actually captured stories, and they'll be up on the website. You can visit projectneverbroken.org now and read a little bit about him. But to our earlier point, we're still getting kind of some things built out. So these stories will go online, so people who didn't have the opportunity to know him can learn a little bit more about him. But honestly, a bigger, I think, mission that we're going towards is a lot of people go into law enforcement to make a difference and to have impact, and they want to help people. It's really hard to see that maybe in today's environment, but that is still really what people want to do. And having somebody that they can look to that did that and hear from others the impact that in this case Greg had on them, or which, this new recruit could have, it is still possible. And we still absolutely need these people. Again, they're wired differently. They are brave souls. They, often have good hearts and good intentions. So we are going to support them so that they know that there is still the ability to have that impact. And hopefully Greg inspires them, maybe, gets them over that hump to pursue it. And, all of us will continue to do the work to make sure that they hear other messaging besides some of this false narrative, some of this hate, this vilification. The majority of, to your point, their interactions are above and beyond, and they put others in front of themselves daily.
We've covered the police thing quite a bit here, and at one point we had an author on the show, and she'd been a police officer, medically retired, because that job also medically retires people every day.
Yeah. Yeah.
But she at one point realized that she was an officer in Oakland, which is no joke, Oakland, California. And she realized that she was the only free police officer in the entire city,
Meaning,
that there was nobody else. She was the one squad car driving around doing policing work.
oh
And so
wow.
there's no help coming. There's no nothing. It's just her and an entire city of 400,000 plus people.
Wow. And why was that? Why would there only be one
Not enough
squad
police
car?
officers. I mean, you think, okay, you arrest somebody, there goes most of your shift right there. I mean, from the call until you are releasing that prisoner to that person, how many hours is that? You got to write a report. And so there are just not enough police officers,
Well,
yeah.
I think that point right there circles back to, the work that I do. We are becoming our own
Oh boy.
first responders. So the more that we can personally do to stay off of a criminal or predator's radar and not have anything happen, avoidance is the key in today's age and
Right.
day and age and environment. Like, anything you can do to avoid being a victim is what we want to do, because we have to kind of compensate for the downsize of these departments for all kinds of reasons. That we as civilians need to know, how do we make ourselves more situationally aware so we just avoid bad things from happening altogether. So I think all of the work that I was doing to, what happened, to what the environment is, there is a thread that means we need to be kind of looking out for number one at this point. I mean, I hate to say it, and I wish it wasn't that way, but it just is the reality. And, you know, how do we help solve our own problem?
Well, in general, I think it's always been true. I mean, the first response is self-response. And
Right.
then there's the immediate response, Pete jumping out of his car to render aid. And then when someone gets around, then what's the first thing you say when you get someone call 911? Okay,
Yeah.
so now they're third in line, and they're going to come. How do you take care of that kid that's struggling? If they need to stay the night at your house to cool off from being around their folks, let them come to the house. The community has to take care of
Mhm.
itself before. The police really should be augmenting and providing a force that hopefully we need less of, because we've wrapped our arms around each other enough to take care of each other. That's kind of sounds kind of hippy dippy, but it's not going to change if you just rely on the government to solve your problems. And then you say, well, they need more training. Well, that means you need more money, and that means you need more police,
Yeah.
and it just the pile of stuff
Right.
higher, because you're doing less and less work. Get out of your house, get involved in your own community, whether you volunteer at the church, go to scout, whatever it is, Little League, whatever it is that you do, get involved in your community, be an asset, and help to provide stability that needs there. Not every parent has the capability of raising a kid well. Not every parent has a two-parent house, is a two-parent household. Everybody needs some help somewhere along the way. And that community piece, it's if This is the unity thing that I talk about, right?
Mhm.
If you are so diverse that you are never unified or a one, a community, then you have to have an outside element, and that element has to lean on power. That's just how that works to create compliance as opposed to create community. It's the wrong calm word, compliance
Right.
versus community.
Well, and it's in the name, community.
Yeah,
So,
community, right?
yeah,
Instead of
yeah,
compliance. Yeah, that's brilliant.
yeah,
But I mean that's it right there. We have to be more, look, we always use the word resilient. So we have to be more resilient. What's in your
right,
car right now? Should something happen to you? Should something happen to someone around you? What should you have in your car? Are you proficient in those things? Whether it's CPR or giving someone an IV or wrapping a mylar blanket around somebody, prevent shot, whatever it's going to be. There are so many things you can do, and it takes up a little bit of space in your car, and you're prepared. The willingness to hop
yeah,
out of your car and say, "Hey, you're stuck in the middle of the road with a gas can." I've done this in the last couple of years, and I'm like, "Let me help you. At least flag off the other cars while you try to put fuel in, because that is a dangerous thing to be on the side of the road, or in this case, in the road,
right,
your car out of gas."
yeah. Yeah,
Oh,
and again, I think it comes back to the mindset, like, knowing what you're gonna do, and again, for women, there might be a different set of things
right.
we need to think about before we do that, but, just knowing, yeah, if I see somebody in need, I'm gonna help, and that's kinda, I think what you're saying is we have to decide, are we gonna come around each other? And then I think, again, these tragedies, you and I have both experienced them, and having people that you can talk to that have come back. Again, this
Yeah.
Project Never Broken exists to lead by example. Like, these tragedies can either take you out or they can direct you to make a difference for others. And it's a very conscious, intentional choice. The choice we've made is to be there for others who have experienced this, help in any way we can. I've connected with a lot of other individuals, wives who have started nonprofits because of tragedies like this happening. It's being that community and unifying around this need of supporting one another.
Along the way, we have talked to a lot of people on the Break It Down show, you and I. You've always brought incredible guests, and just whether they were friends or just the leaders in the industry. We one time had a serial killer call into the show, which
We
is
did. Yes, we did.
what stands out. I mean, I don't know how many podcasts you've been on more than mine, but it's got to be one of the top podcasts you've been on. What stands out for you in terms of your memories of Break It Down show stuff with me and guests that we've had?
I think it's like your willingness to always be so welcoming. I'll be like, "Hey, Pete, I'd like to co-host with you," or, "Hey, you need to talk to so and so." I think what stands out to me is you, and your willingness to always be open to new things and to get different messages out. You have a really interesting mix of guest and co-host. So that's what stands out to me. And I think what's interesting also about your show is the variety of kind of topics and subjects. I know you've had directors, you've had musicians, you've had authors, you've had people who, are subject matter experts. So it always, for me, brings me back because I'm always interested in who you're talking to. So yes, I have been on other podcasts, but of course you're at the top there.
I love it. I love it at the top. Yeah, and by the way, you're one of those people. I mean, it's just you fill this incredible niche, in our array of shows as you look across, like, here's how women stay safe. They listen to this expert whose name is Shelley Klingerman, and she comes on, and we've talked about this from any number of angles. Whether it's my angle, like as the counterintelligence agent spy guy, like you want to build a fast network of people that recognize you and will reach out a hand and help you, in an instant. And then you have guys like Chase that are like, or not Chase Hughes, but gosh dang it, now his name escapes me. The guy that wrote the book about the wolves, the 100 deadly skills. Tell me who that
Oh,
is.
Clint
Clint, yes,
Emerson.
yeah, Clint, yeah. Clint, where Clint's like, look at yourself in the mirror, know where your jabbing pencil is, know where, and it's like, he looks at it from a different point of view. It's all part of the same sphere of preparedness,
Mhm.
where I'm using some winks and some smiles and some handshakes and some niceness, and then he's using like the spines, on a porcupine's back. Stay away from me. I'm leaving. And we've looked at all of these things. It's been an incredible journey of conversations whenever we get on the show.
Yeah, and I think to Phil Chalmers was the other gentleman that had
Yeah.
the serial killer call it. I think the angle we were looking at from him, like, what's a serial killer look at? And we want to make sure we're doing everything that is not attractive
Yeah.
to that person. So yeah, that's just another angle that we've explored this, and hopefully we'll continue to do so.
Of course, of course. I mean, you always say, "Hey, I want to do this in the show," and I'm like, "Okay, let's do it."
Yeah.
Because here's the thing I've realized with networking and podcasts. This is like a podcast. No, it is. My network is big and powerful because I rely on your network and that person's network and this person's network and my own network building skills. But when you bring in somebody, even if it's a show. We talk about life, whether it's
Yeah.
your friend who raises chickens, or and rides
Yes,
lawnmowers across the nation.
that's right. Yes, that's right. That's Brad Otter.
Yeah, Brad is awesome. I mean,
Mhm.
it doesn't ever stop, and because of the willingness to get out of the car, the willingness to have a show and say yes to other people. People always say, "How do you get so many incredible people on that?" Well, there's must be 15 ways I get people on the show, and one of the big ways is I say, "Hey, Shelley, this is your podcast. Book guests," and you go, "Okay," and then off you go.
Yeah, and again, I always appreciate that offer.
Yeah, well, you take me up on it, and how easy is it for you to produce a show when there's nothing to do except for bring the guest along with you? It's like it just
Yeah,
becomes
and for anyone else that's looking to produce a show, call Pete.
yeah.
He does it.
I'm good at this.
Yes, he is.
I'm good at taking your show and improving it. What? Okay, so it's sort of still the new year time, right? We're concluding the new year thing. What are some of your things for 2022?
So I'm really focusing on engaging with these corporations. I can do a one-off presentation. That's fine. I'm always willing to do that. But what we're really moving towards is what I talked about before, which is this reinforcement training. The human can only absorb so much in an hour. So what we're doing is breaking it down, and we're feeding it in more bite-sized pieces. We're reinforcing what you learned. We're adding on to it. We're giving people an opportunity to go apply it, come back and talk about it. So where I'm going in this new year is something that I've learned through the work I've done, which is again, always willing to do a 1 hour, but really getting more into this re-engagement and this reinforcement training. So I'm working with various companies on that. Open to more if anyone's interested. I'm working on the nonprofit because it's important. Again, it's part of my grieving process. It's part of my family's grieving process, and we're doing important work. And we are going to make sure that something positive comes out of this evil, senseless tragedy. I'm also, looking at getting more politically engaged. There's a lot of things that are not okay in this country, and um, policing should be a bipartisan. It's public safety. Um, if you aren't happy with something, you can either sit on the sidelines and complain about it and let someone else make a decision for you, or you can engage, and that's something that I have taken quite literally, and I'm engaging more. I want to be part of the solution, and I want to be part of the process. Um, so those are, three things that are going to be my focus: is the nonprofit, the training, and then the engagement to be, again, part of the solution and not part of the problem.
I think we should create a vertical on your Stiletto Agency, and or maybe it's a horizontal company, and we do travel, and we'll just take people out, and we'll take them out live so they can go out and actually practice their skills
I
live,
love it. I love it.
and then we'll
We'll
go
get
to
Clint involved, and he can do his
yes,
100 deadly skills, and we'll actually like make people get out of zip ties, and
yeah,
we'll call it experience. We'll call it experiential.
experiential travel, right?
Yeah, experiential learning.
Yeah,
You're
yeah.
gonna actually have to do it.
Yeah, we'll go to Acapulco, we'll go to Lima, we'll go to all these different places, and just let them learn how to be out and about. Can you imagine? Like that would be I
I
would
think
take that
I think
training.
we got something, Pete.
I
I think
I
we
think
need to
that's
go with it. Yeah.
Brilliant.
If anyone's interested, get a hold of us. Let's
You know,
all let's all do
look
this.
to Ciudad de Mexico, and we'll make it happen. Any questions for me before we wrap this thing up?
I don't think so. Again, always I appreciate the opportunity to come on, share my story. Thank you again for letting me talk about Project Never Broken. It's important, um, it's meaningful, and we will make something good come of this. If anyone, has an experience, they can get a hold of you to connect with me. If anyone wants to collaborate on it, I'm always open to that. So I don't have questions. I just have a big old thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah. And hopefully I'll be out in Indiana again this year. I was out in Indiana for a minute last year, but by the time I was really worn out and going north I was basically in Kentucky still. I was in
Mm.
Evansville. How far is
Yeah,
that
you were
from you?
close. You were really close. But if you get this way, we'll do a remote podcast.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
We'll
Yeah.
do it live from Indiana.
Live from Indiana. Yeah, and we will. And I like to get back out on the road. I just got to get the money together. Which, speaking of that, everybody, if you want to help support the show, just go to the Break It Down show page and then go to the PayPal link and just put a little subscription each month. You'll see me out on the road. The more I can do that, the more I can get out of the studio and go, do things like, or heck, you just get a hold of me and say, hey, Pete, I want to buy you a tank of gas to get you out on the road. That's great. And of course, California, it's going to cost you a little bit of money, but but these are the ways you can support the show. I don't need Patreon. I don't need some other company to help me. I need you and me. We make this thing happen by supporting one another. So that's how you get me out on the road. Just again, go to breakitdownshow.com, hit that PayPal link, and just put a little bit of money in there. Look, $5 a month across 100 people is $500, and I can quickly turn that into me getting out on the road a lot more often. So invent your
Right.
own subscription.
And you tell their stories. I mean, I think that's the beauty of it is that you tell other people's stories. So that's a
I'd love
great investment.
I would love to do that even more and just tell the most basic people kind of stories because, it's not all car crashes and avalanches and shootings. It's, there's people out there doing day-to-day things. And we've
Yep.
got to realize that, you know, we're not what they show us on TV. Go drive
Right.
around your big,
Yep.
big, beautiful country and see how beautiful it is and see how
Yep.
wonderful the people are. It's just,
Yep.
there's so much of it.
Be
All right.
intentional. Thank
Yes.
you.
Be intentional. Stand by. Hey, thanks for watching the show. I really appreciate it. Right here, you can subscribe. Please do that. It makes the show grow. Hit that notification bell so you know which incredible guest is coming up next. Down below is the PayPal link. You can put a small subscription in. That is an enormous help. All that money goes right back into the show. And then right up over here are the next episodes you should listen to, curated by yours truly. Thank you so much.